Tonight, we are super excited to welcome Avery Alder.
Yay!
Talk about these topics and to play Dream Askew.
Yes.
Thank you both so much for having me.
Well, we are so happy to have you. So a little bit about Avery. Avery is a queer role-playing game designer, hailing from the Sinix territory. Is that pronounced correctly? Sinix territory in rural British Columbia. She's been independently publishing games for the past 16 years. Her past work includes Monster Hearts, The Quiet Year, Dream Askew, Ribbon Drive, and an array of smaller and scrappier projects. Avery's games, whether set against the backdrop of a collapsing civilization or in the midst of our everyday lives, explore how our identities, relationships, and communities transform one another, which sounds amazing. So I'm super excited. Yeah.
Yes. And you can reach and find more information about Avery at Lacking Ceremony on Twitter or buriedwithoutceremony.com.
Yep.
And we're going to pop those into the chat because that's what you do. And then before we start playing, we're going to do some announcements.
Yes. All right. Our first announcement is Friday Night Cast. This week is our Wander Home debrief. That'll be tomorrow, Friday at 8:45 p.m. Eastern. Am I right? Is that Eastern?
8:45 would be Central.
Oh, 8:45 Central. Okay, which
Central,
would make it which would be 6:45 Pacific and 9:45 Eastern. Our next game will be Avatar Legends, and that starts June 10th in the middle of Tags,
which is the Therapeutic and Applied Geek and Gaming Summit, which is a bunch of people in the gaming world and the therapeutic world and the other applied uses like occupational therapy and spiritual direction, where we're going to get together online for 3 days. And there's going to be workshops on tabletop games and video games and geek media and a chance to hang out and play games and geek out with puppets and each other. And you can still sign up there at this link at 2022.tagsummit.org. 2022.
Yep. Tickets are still available. So, and then on June 19th, we have Gaze of Our Lives playing Our Traveling Home. It's a game by Ash Kreider, a game about happy queer romance, found family, and finding healing through belonging.
Which is appropriate that we say the word belonging because we're playing a outside belonging game.
Woohoo!
All right. That brings us, we've already introduced a game designer. That brings us to Dream Askew and Dream Apart. I love flashing books. I don't know why. This is I look forward to every show I'm on.
You've got a lot of props. It's really dynamic, interactive.
Yep.
So tell us about the game.
Yeah, so Dream Askew is a game that I first started working on in 2013, and the book that you just held up was published in 2018. That book is actually a collaboration between myself and another game designer and author named Benjamin Rosenbaum, and we each designed one of the two games in that book. So Benjamin designed Dream Apart, which is a game like a historical fantasy, a Jewish fantasy set in a shtetl community in Eastern Europe. And Dream Askew is my game of queer community in the rubble of a ongoing slow collapse apocalypse, which has brought a lot of psychic weirdness into the world. So this is a game that is both of the games are simultaneously fantastical in some of the elements they're setting, but also exploring real communities and real kind of experiences of marginalization within this semi-fictionalized world building.
I described Dream Askew to somebody recently and they said, "Oh, so you're talking about today?"
Right.
Yeah, definitely like designing this initially in 2013 and then kind of returning to it and developing it more and publishing it in 2018. It felt less science fiction.
Right.
But also one of the premises of kind of Dream Askew is that the apocalypse isn't some universal single event that that hits everyone in the same way at the same time, right? Like we're looking at the collapse of civilization as an ongoing unequal process. And so it's maybe more accurate to say that like I have been hit by it more in recent years. I will be hit by it much more in future years. But there have been people who have been, you know, living it their whole lives at the same time. So that's a bit about Dream Askew. It's a GM-less game. It is a kind of a while there is an initial foundation for the setting, we collectively build out the world and kind of clarify a lot of how we're imagining the apocalypse together. And today, rather than jumping in and playing out scenes, we're going to be going through the world building, character creation, and community building part of the game. I think it's kind of a unique part of it that I'm really proud of to this day.
Awesome. Yeah, I've had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
And when we imagine who we would invite to the show and imagine inviting you, we thought we would talk about the communal aspects of spirituality and of transformation. And we really think of spirituality as about the questions of who am I, why am I here, what makes me come alive, you know, the big kind of questions that we all end up asking ourselves in some ways. And they're often about transformation. So, you know, the idea of communal, personal and communal transformation to me is part of the definition of spirituality. But we're really wanting to excited to look at not just the personal, but also the collective and communal dimensions of discovery and transformation.
Awesome. Yeah, I felt intimidated a little bit when I was asked to come onto a show that has like a lens on spirituality in specific, because that's not kind of a domain where I feel like I have a lot of grounding and knowledge specifically. But the more I thought about it, the more I like remembered that like a lot of the work I do is asking questions about collective meaning making, about developing like a body of practice together for making sense of the world. And I feel like there's like a really obvious and large kind of overlap and intersection between all these things, right?
There is absolutely. Collective meaning making is such a great description of spirituality. So I think it's, this is such a really good fit. So. And
we tend, in Tanya and I, in our discussions and my life, to distinguish between spirituality and religion. Right? Spirituality is about meaning making, knowing who you are, connection to the whatever is that which is bigger than us. Religion, in my sense, came along and said, here's some great ways to do this thing that you want to do. Let's add the social element. Let's add like the political element, right? Unfortunately, and all these other things that get in the way of doing that meaning making work. So I like to really be careful and stress that they're really distinguished in our thinking.
Yeah. So. That definitely applies to me as well. So, well, I don't know. I guess we can go ahead and get started.
Let's make some meaning.
Let's make some meaning.
Yeah, so maybe I can jump in to start. There is kind of an intro text to the game that I can read aloud for us, and then we can kind of go through the steps of creating our characters, our community, and our larger world together.
Okay.
Deal.
Great. So I'm jumping over to this Miro board that we're going to be using to kind of guide us through this process, and I'm going to read through the overview from that first page. Dream Askew gives us ruined buildings and wet tarps, nervous faces and campfire glow, strange new psychic powers, fierce queer love, and turbulent skies above a fledgling community, asking, what do you do next? Imagine that the collapse of civilization didn't happen everywhere at the same time. Instead, it's happening in waves. Every day, more people fall out of the society intact. We queers were always living in the margins of that society, finding solidarity, love, and meaning in the strangest of places. Apocalypse didn't come for us first, but it did come for us. Gangs roam the apocalyptic wasteland, and scarcity is becoming the norm. The world is getting scarier, and just beyond our everyday perception, howling and hungry, there exists a psychic maelstrom. We banded together to form a queer enclave, a place to live, sleep, and hopefully heal. More than ever before, each of us is responsible for the survival and fate of our community. What lies in this rubble? For this close-knit group of queers, could it be utopia?
That's super compelling.
Thank you. Yeah, so that is our kind of our intro to the setting.
Okay.
And then what we kind of do from this is move on. Again, on this Miro board, just below that page I read from, there are the 6 playbooks of this game. So kind of building on the structure that another game, Apocalypse World, introduced, this game has 6 different kind of playbooks, and each of them is kind of like a character class that we're going to customize. And so what I like to do is start by going, like, alternating between the 3 of us, each of us taking a turn to introduce one of these. So going around twice to do so.
Okay.
And Tanya, I see that your cursor is actually right now over the introducing the iris. So if you wanted to read through the name of that character and then just the italicized block of text there, that would be great.
Okay, so this is the iris. The psychic maelstrom touches us all, but the iris has been indelibly marked and changed. Their gifts are unprecedented and unexplainable, but may hold the secret to our healing. What is everyone so afraid of? The iris is an unnerving individual. Their power is mysterious, ephemeral, and unprecedented.
Oops.
Awesome. And Menachem, do you want to go next with the hawker?
Yeah, the hawker. The market failed. The shops and restaurants and factories closed their doors. And into that void stepped the hawker, hustling and working odd jobs, pulling a livelihood out of the rubble of apocalypse. The hawker is an industrious individual. Their power is material, social, and contingent.
Right. Introducing the stitcher. Things break, supplies run out, bodies get wounded. The stitcher is there, fixing, mending, making, repurposing. They have a workshop and an uncanny intuition. The stitcher is a resourceful individual. Their power is technical, material, and reactive.
Introducing the tiger. The police fled the neighborhood. Things were scary for a while. Now the tiger and their gang own the streets around here. Is that ownership still contested? The tiger is a wicked, fierce individual. Their power is social, violent, and hard won.
Introducing the torch. All routines and mundane knowledges crumble under the weight of apocalypse. But the torch has answers. Are they ancient teachings, ecstatic fantasy, or a new faith dawning? Followers draw near to their warm glow. The torch, the torch is a compelling individual. Their power is spiritual, social, and mystical.
And then finally, introducing the arrival. When society shoves you out, you don't really have time to process. You need food, shelter, friends. The arrival found their way to the enclave. Can they barter a measure of amnesty into a permanent home? The arrival is an individual in flux. Their power is contingent, technical, and suspect. So these are 6 character archetypes. Do any speak to you guys in particular and resonate?
Yes. Just saying, they all do in different ways. Just saying
Yeah.
which one.
I really like the Iris and the Stitcher.
I was thinking you might go for Stitcher or Hawker, but I didn't spend too much time trying to guess. What's calling you more of those two? If we were around a table, we'd be passing around pieces of paper.
I know.
And all looking at them.
Right. Yes. I really like the ethereal feel of the Iris. Yeah.
Right.
Maybe I'll play to that and go with the torch.
Okay. We have the kind of, I feel like in a lot of ways, the two most kind of spiritually attuned characters, which is great. And so I feel like, how do I want to offset that? I'm kind of leaning either towards the hawker, who is kind of a provider and an industrious individual, often one of the few people still really clinging to a lot of the capitalist worldview. Either that one or the tiger, who is kind of the gang leader, the enforcement and protection racket of the town.
Right.
Security.
Yeah, exactly. Does either of you have a leaning or a suggestion out of those two which I should go for?
I think we'll work with whatever you pick.
Okay. Because I never go for it, I'm going to go for the tiger.
Yay! I was hoping you would go for that one. I thought about it. It was one of the ones I was leaning towards as well. So, but then I went for the Iris. There's all of these are just looks like really cool to play. So
awesome, thank you. So the way that the character sheet is set up, the left-hand column is the introducing the character. The middle column is character creation, and then the right column is everything we'll be using in scenes as we actually play scenes. And so kind of building your individual character is really straightforward. We can use the kind of highlighter function on this app and just kind of go through. And to start with, it says choose a name. And so highlight any of those names that you want to use and then choose a look. We each have two things that we choose for our look. So for the tiger, I'm choosing what my face is like and what my arms are like. And the torch is choosing eyes and face. So these are kind of like defining features that that the author would make sure to describe for our kind of character in a novel, for example. We have a gender to choose. We have some wardrobe styles to mix and match. And then everything beneath that is really unique to our specific character archetype. So we can kind of start to go through, and as we go through, especially since we're live on air and people are listening in right now, I think it's great to kind of read aloud what you're choosing as you go. It also gives us a chance to kind of like vibe off of one another.
I'm going to skip ahead to gender. I decided to go with predestined because I don't know quite what that means, and I love playing with that.
Awesome. Yeah, one of the things that is fun with this is that some of these genders are ones that feel really resonant and familiar for our real present world today. Some of them are entirely made up and they are apocalyptic genders that only exist in this world. Some are kind of in a middle zone of like familiar and resonant for specific groups and communities in our world today, but maybe unfamiliar to a lot of people beyond them. Man and woman only appear once. They are both in the Arrival.
Mm.
But since none of us are new here, those genders don't appear.
In Sleepaway by Jay Dragon, our next guest, I loved Rusty Sword or Rusted Sword for gender.
That's great. Okay.
I know that my name is Impala, and that's all I have chosen so far.
I've chosen Rhyme.
Rhyme.
I really like Monsoon.
You're
a
stormy spiritual. Because for look, I went with calm eyes and gentle face, so I'm really the serene one.
Ooh, in which case, my look is a frame and eyes, and I like a steely frame. Actually, maybe a willowy frame. A willowy frame and luminous eyes. And I am super intrigued by Gargoyle as a gender. Like I have an image of Monsoon perched on the edge of a building.
I love that. I also selected Gargoyle, and if it feels like it's stepping on your toes, I can change it a little bit. But for Impala, I said that they have burned arms and a masked face. They're a gargoyle, and their wardrobe is a mixture of breathable athletics and leather. And what I'm imagining is kind of like leather armor pieces, almost like maybe a leather jacket and kind of like leather, almost like padding or patches that they've put onto otherwise like a parkour oriented kind of outfit.
Okay.
So I think also ready to perch on ledges, gargoyle fashion.
I have to choose two rituals, and I chose Street Wards and Bacchanal.
What does street wards mean in this case?
Like I do the protective wards on the streets around wherever those streets or paths or whatever's around our enclave. Because I also have striking colors and drawn sigils on my clothing.
Ooh.
These street wards are kind of like actively maintained protection.
That's how I'm imagining them. Yeah, we go out and draw symbols in the dirt or paint it on the pavement.
All right. So Impala has two gang trappings, and these can be things like motorcycles and guns and chains and rusty pipes. But for Impala, I've chosen medical supplies and clean drugs. And I think that Impala is runs like a harm reduction gang, and like barters like penicillin for like peace treaties, and like offers like safe supply of drugs, because in the apocalypse, I imagine that it's like even more dangerous to be buying street drugs than it is today, right? Like a lot of dangerous supply. And so Impala is really about making sure that people aren't overdosing in the streets. I think
awesome.
that's kind of their mission in life, but they also are like knowing that they have to use all the supplies they have to be like buying peace for our community.
Buying peace for what?
Buying peace for our community. right? Like if we're not going to be using guns to protect ourselves, then we need to be bartering penicillin for like agreements that we're not going to get raided.
Right. Right.
Don't hurt us. We have something you need.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I like that. Well, let's see. My wardrobe style, I feel like I'm trying to decide between hoods and robes or casual wear. So maybe some sort of combination. Can I do that? Of like a long jacket with a hood on it. And a slender weapon carefully concealed.
Ooh.
Ooh, nice. What is the weapon?
The weapon is a stiletto. And then let's see, I have to pick 2 psychic gifts. Well, my name is Monsoon, so I think storm sheltering should be one of them. And I like unearthing. I'm not sure what it means yet, but I guess I'll find out.
Ooh, awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of what storm sheltering means?
I guess what I'm imagining is that in the wake of the apocalypse, given what we know about climate change, that storms are really intense, and that I don't make the storms go somewhere else, because that's not good. Trying to control that stuff is not good, but I can't control the storm, so I can shelter people. So I can almost create like a little dome of protection so that there are no like exact lightning strikes or anything like that.
Do you have to kind of become the lightning rod in order to protect them?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we probably end up working together with the wards and your,
Yeah.
So I have to decide my gang's big flaw, and I'm deciding between 2 right now. But one of them would have a lot of implications for our community, and that one is the Enclave isn't entirely on board with our vision. And since our vision is delivering medical supplies to dangerous gangs and delivering drug supply to people who use drugs all throughout our area, I feel like that, like potentially we have people who are like prohibitionists, or potentially we have people who are like, we should let our enemies suffer, or something like that. And if people don't think that's what our community is like, then I would instead choose, since that unsettling murder, I've lost some trust. Do we have any opinions?
So our community ideals are which?
Well, so if I choose the Enclave isn't entirely on board with our vision, it's clear that my gang is all about delivering medical supplies and safe drug supplies to anyone in need. I think that implies a lot about our community, like probably that they're prohibitionists, or they think we're enabling drug use or something like that. So it's either that or I've recently murdered somebody.
I mean, I really like the idea of providing these things. I really like the idea of harm reduction and providing important medication.
I mean, if I'm
Important
doing
medicine.
bacchanals, I want to make sure there's good drugs.
And so it sounds like the two of you are on board with the vision. Is everyone in the community?
See, something I wonder about a lot is like when things collapse, what is the role of like mental health providers and spiritual caretakers going to be?
Yeah.
You know, people are going to be like food first kind of stuff, but are they really going to think about and value the role of us, of people who take care of people in non-physical ways?
Right.
So
maybe we can play with that.
Okay, yeah. Maybe I'm gonna select that one. That's maybe the gang's big flaw. It's just there are tensions. People aren't sure that we're doing the right thing. Like maybe this is a waste of resources.
Right.
Maybe this is just the wrong approach to trying to take care of people. And then that kind of feeds into one of my two key relationships that I have to choose, and I chose the Wasteland biker pack I have an uneasy truce with. And I kind of imagine that it's like part of that complication is maybe that Impala is like supplying them with drugs that they're often using, and like in association with like the raids they do on nearby communities or something like that, right? Like there's like a tension of like, is it safe to be giving these people this stuff when we know that they're going out, roaring about the landscape, like causing a lot of violence in nearby communities, but never ours because of this truth.
Which could be a regional problem for us.
Right.
We never attacked those guys.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, great.
Would it be drugs or do you think it would be medicine?
Yeah. It could be either.
Like, yeah, like if one of them is like, if the leader is diabetic or something.
Oh yeah, okay, maybe. Yeah, I was thinking that maybe it's fraught because it's like I'm supplying them with the cocaine they do before they go on their race.
Oh wow. Yeah. That would be that would really create tension with the enclave who are like wait, what are you doing?
And I'm like, yeah, I it's messy, but I have a first priority, right? Like I have a first principle here.
Right.
That I'm taking to its logical conclusion, and that's causing downstream harm, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can totally see that.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I'm leaning into this tension.
Okay. All right.
Well, I decided some interesting things are coming together. Like, what looming threat do I alone truly understand? And it's that hope and mischief are fires that we must keep ever burning, or we will face eternal darkness. So
say that again.
Hope and mischief are fires that we must keep ever burning, or we will face eternal darkness. So I'm just really, I'm just really calm looking, gentle faced person who's leading bacchanals and teaching hope and mischief together.
Awesome.
And maybe two key relationships that feel connected is the lovers I must please and the fairies who have taken me in. And I haven't quite decided if they're fae fairies or radical fairies yet. Maybe both. I don't know. We'll play to find out if we had time to play that.
I really like that you've caught and highlighted that kind of like pivot point of like, are these spiritual beings in the spiritual realm? Are these like radical fairies, the gay pagan commune building,
beautifully dressed,
right?
And there's a lot of I'm going to leave this here and see how people interpret it, kind of buried throughout this game, which I always find fun to see where people go with it. So that's great.
Maybe I'll name my character Jim Henson based on a suggestion in the Twitch chat. Thank you, Calvin.
That's awesome. Let's see. Okay, so I have to decide what the world's psychic maelstrom told me. And I am bouncing between that I could swallow their pain away and that love is the only salvation.
I mean, both of those go of bacchanals. I make you snort.
Points.
I'm blushing.
I think I'm gonna go with that love is the only salvation. That was where I was really, yeah. So 2 key relationships.
Do you need to think on it and we can go to the tiger?
Yeah, let me think about this.
Yeah, so my key relationships, I have the Wasteland biker pack, who I have an uneasy truce with, which I mentioned. And then my other one is my paws support crew, like my HIV positive support crew. And I'm imagining that this is like when society started to collapse, we fell out of it, like not having access to PrEP and not having access to retrovirals is, I think, what radicalized me, what made me feel like I need to organize like a gang of drug runners to keep people like alive and safe and healthy and living authentic lives. So I think that support group, and I'm not sure like how much, I don't think I know how to like work in a lab and make pharmaceuticals, but maybe I know people who are doing some like DIY drug fabrication type stuff. But I think, yeah, that's kind of my backstory, and I've got that support crew. I think we like actually have like a Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. support meetup kind of thing. So.
Nice.
A semicircle of chairs in the abandoned gas station, that kind of thing.
I like it. All
right, so I already want to keep these characters and play them at something more.
I know, right? So my 2 key relationships, I keep going back to the slowly dying drag mama whose pain I ease.
Sounds great.
And I think our recently exiled elder, a weird eater I created.
Oh, you're putting 2 together. I like it.
Oh, are those 2? I thought that was
Do it.
Those were all one.
Do it.
I mean, yeah, usually the comment is separating them, but if you want to have them be one, a recently exiled elder, the weird eater I created all as one, I think that's great.
Okay, yeah. I was reading that as all one, so yeah.
That's right. Misinterpretation is like the foundation of creative work. So do you know what a weird eater is and how one would create one?
So one of my psychic gifts is unearthing. And I think I don't just unearth things from the earth. I think I unearth things from people. And so I think what I unearthed was an ability in this person to, they were already an elder, but then I unearthed this talent in them that anything that was kind of odd and troubling, or I think they could kind of sense like psychic currents, and they would absorb them. So they were the weird eating, and they could absorb like anything that felt imbalanced or strange. But sometimes those things are okay, right? And so it ended up causing more disruption. So then they were exiled. So I feel pretty guilty about that, because in unearthing this talent, I caused their exile.
Right. Well, that is, I think, a juicy point at which to move on from our characters to
Okay.
the world at large. So we're going to do the same thing that we did introducing the characters. Now we are going to be introducing the 6 setting elements. That's kind of in the frame below on that mural board. Maybe I'll start. We'll do one each, 2 times around again. So here is, you also play the varied scarcities. There's no postal service, no municipal waste treatment, no reservoir operations manager to treat your water, no ecological impact survey team, no police, no road maintenance crew, and that means no refrigerated trucks hauling groceries into the area, no signal in the cell towers most days. The people who used to think about this stuff so you didn't have to, they're gone now.
It's chilling.
Tanya, you should do the psychic maelstrom.
Okay. So you also play the psychic maelstrom. Close your eyes, open your brain. Something is wrong with the world. That something is the psychic maelstrom. It's just beyond our everyday perception, ever present and howling. It can offer guidance, protection, even flashes of brilliant inspiration, but it's hungry, and nobody knows what will satisfy its appetite.
We also play the society intact. For some reason, we thought the collapse was going to hit everybody at the same time. But nothing happens like that, neatly, evenly. Civilization crumbles in waves, eroding the peripheries of good society. Apocalypse is only a distant nightmare for the privileged, a cautionary tale about what might happen to them if they should fall from the master's arms. You'd be surprised what one of those people would do to keep their society intact.
You also play the digital realm. Everything we'd ever known or said was embedded somewhere inside it. Even though the digital realm was young, it was hard to remember back to the way life was without it. It seemed as permanent as it was pervasive. Apocalypse pulled the digital realm to pieces. Networks fell into disconnect. Satellites blinked out. Computers were ripped apart and stripped of their precious metal content. But humans are wily and resourceful. They know how to salvage, repurpose, and rebuild. Maybe the digital realm still has a future.
You also play the outlying gangs. People had wildly differing ideas about what the collapse of law and order meant for their future. Some shuffled the mortal coil at the first sign of real danger. Others took to the hills, equipped with water purifiers and dried goji berries. But some people stayed right where they were, armed and alert, ready to carve out an empire by whatever means necessary. Stop whatever you're doing, crane your neck just a tiny bit. You can probably hear their roaring in the distance.
And finally, you also play the earth itself. We built a new world upon its back, glass and steel stacked toward the heavens. We learned how to pull electricity out of every natural element, to mechanize, to automate. Some of us went whole days forgetting that anything existed outside our edifice. Tanya, move your cursor, please. We wounded the earth. We alienated ourselves from its touch and its harmonies. We broke holes in the sky. When it tried to warn us, we didn't listen. My 15-year-old was just talking about this. What now? Will apocalypse cement that alienation for all eternity, or finally bring us home?
Like some light, cheerful.
If we were playing, we would take turns picking these up when we weren't a main character in the scene with them, right?
Yeah, and so part of how this works is that we have no single kind of game master or person running the game, and instead everyone takes turns playing these setting elements. And so when you're not kind of the main spotlight of a scene, yeah, you're potentially pulling up your settings sheet and playing that element of the world. And so what we do at this point is we're each going to choose one of these setting elements and customize it just a little bit. And if we were playing, then we would be kind of stewarding this part of the world,
Right.
at least for a while.
So if Tanya had an interaction with the psychic maelstrom, someone else would pick up psychic maelstrom and GM in a way, right? Play the setting, right?
Exactly, yeah. And these setting elements, kind of, we each are in charge of stewarding one, but they can move about the table. Obviously, if Tanya's having a scene where Monsoon is interacting with the psychic maelstrom, we don't really want Tanya playing both sides of that conversation, because then me and you are sitting around where Tanya just talks to herself. It's not ideal role playing. And so there's kind of like a pick up when and trade away when prompts to make sure that there's always kind of as many people involved at the table as possible. Okay. But any of us can choose a setting element to customize to begin with. So which one?
I had a thought about collective discovery and transformation, just talking about the no GM, right? Or we all share those responsibilities and we build the world together, right? There we are discovering and deciding together the tools of transformation instead of one person sitting here and doing all that, most of that work.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things that I've worked to do in both this game and The Quiet Year, which is another game that I wrote about kind of community process, is to have some of the elements of like playing the game and setting up the game reflect the kinds of decision-making processes that the communities we're depicting would also be experiencing. And so figuring out like how is power distributed at the gaming table kind of mirrors how is power distributed in our community. So just kind of, that intentional echoing, like you say.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I like to say that all games work for this, but some games are set up and better for it. Like, and this is definitely set up better for that element of it than like, even any GM'd game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tanya, do you want to decide what the psychic maelstrom's all about?
Sure. That sounds really intriguing.
I was thinking of going for society intact just because I got to pick one.
Okay.
And then I will choose the earth itself. And so for each of us, there's not as much kind of character creation for this page, but there is a circle to desires list. And so out of those things, we each get to choose what our setting element wants. And to use an example, the outlying gangs, we could build it so they desire the smell of fear and mutant blood, or we could choose that they desire home-cooked meals and somewhere safe to sleep. So this can kind of really flavor and kind of change the lens through which we understand this world.
Oh, okay.
I think for society intact, they want self-preservation, right? But they also want hope renewed.
Hmm.
So they may do everything they can to preserve what they have, but they might also connect to some of us who are also working on hope.
One of the things that the earth wants is carrion.
Mm.
Uh,
Bring out your
it-
dead.
Yeah, it wants death and rot as part of the ongoing cycle of life. And in kind of like in the biggest of the cycles, we are at the death and rot part of the cycle.
That's so intriguing. There's a there's a really amazing book by James Hillman called A Terrible Love of War. But he talks about the Civil War and like visiting a Civil War battlefield, and how it was almost as if in order for the United States to really be a country, that it needed the land needed blood sacrifice. And it was really interesting and powerful. But that what it want when you say carrion, that kind of reminds me of that.
I think the thing that carrion gets paired with in my choice here is healing. And I think the earth knows that what we need now is we need death and we need rot, and that needs to happen before we can have the decomposition necessary to create a fertile ground for healing in the future. So first we need the bodies. We need them rotting. Then we get the healing.
Wow. Let's see. I think that the maelstrom wants fervent intimacy with us. And to be ushered into the world forever.
Mm.
That's perfect. Okay.
All right.
How do you imagine the two kind of connecting with one another?
I think the maelstrom knows that this is a real chicken and egg thing. Which one came first, the desire for the fervent intimacy or the desire to be ushered into the world? But like the desire for fervent intimacy would result in us being ushered into the world forever. The kind of intimacy that the psychic maelstrom desires. It wants to unite with us and touch every one of us, which would alter, I think, everything in the world, right? Like it would, yeah. So I think that's how those two work. Like it just wants what the kind of relationship that Monsoon has, I think it wants with everybody.
It somehow connects to your weird eater.
Yeah.
Eating the weird.
Eating the weird, and
maelstrom.
yeah. And not every, so I think I probably understood its desire for intimacy. And so I was like, yeah, let's do this. But the elder wasn't ready. I don't think the elder was really able to handle it. And so it
Too intimate, too fast.
Too intimate, too fast. Yeah.
Is this why you pair up with me? Because I do the bacchanalia and I encourage this kind of thing, that Teaches a form of intimacy
Yeah. Yeah.
and a way for the
Um,
psychic maelstrom to get to us.
Right.
Ooh, sex magic.
So
So we have parties and intimacy, but we care a lot about safety and protection at the same time. Obviously, I
yeah.
feel like my character is really tied into this, like both like party culture and wanting to make sure that there's safe supply there, as well as like intimacy and wanting to like make sure that people have their most like intimate medical needs cared for. I think there's like a lot of,
Well, we
Well,
definitely highly value you.
yeah. Well, and I mean, I think that intimacy doesn't have to be just about sex, right? It's emotional, and like you were talking about, Avery, there's a medical intimacy, like the administration of medicine is extremely intimate.
caring for bodies, right?
Yeah.
All right, so I think that brings us, we've now defined who our characters are and what the greater world is, and now we're going to focus on that middle layer. This is the last step of kind of our character creation and world building. At the very top set of pages here, above the character sheet, we have this enclave worksheet right in the middle that is our where we would be drawing our map in an ongoing way as we played, but it's also where we have this circle 3 to 5 visuals of our landscape and circle 3 things that are in triangular conflict with one another in our enclave. And I think we have just enough time to kind of fill out these 2 parts and kind of start imagining our community. And then I know we wanted to leave some time for discussion afterwards. So maybe I will just read aloud the full list of visuals, and then we can each pick 1 or 2 that resonate.
Okay.
So here are our options: an abandoned complex, individual homes, shanties and tents, a bustling market, overgrowth, glass and concrete, swamp, reclaimed green space, community gardens, tunnels, moldy tarps, rust, quietude, wreckage, wilds, blockades, squalor, outdoor kitchens, shrines, splendor, high rises, heavy industry, a train station, trailers, bonfires, the remnants of war, the ocean, wastelands, scrub, flooding, mutant plants blooming, farmland, raging parties, piles of trash, eerie warning signs, running water, repurposed plastics, and coarse fibers. So, what jumps out?
I think I want outdoor kitchens.
I love that.
Yeah. I always love a water feature, so the ocean sounds good. But also a train station sounds good. So let me think for a second.
1 or
We
2.
can do both if you want.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we've got a train station and the ocean.
Yeah.
And so, Menachem, where in relationship to the train station are the outdoor kitchens? Are they like on the tracks? Are they far away? Are they like at the outskirts of it?
Do we have a above ground train station or like one of those buildings where people wait for the train to come kind of thing? Or are we thinking a subway station or what?
Well, if the ocean is nearby,
Yeah. No subway.
then yeah, probably no
Okay.
subway.
So there's an old outdoor, there's a tracks and a train station with that building. And we probably use that building for some central uses, right? And we've built onto the outside of them would be the outside kitchens.
Okay, and so we are the end of the line of this still functional train line, I think. And the society intact, roads are harder to maintain than than railways, I've decided. I don't know if that's actually true in real life. But what the Society Intact does is they load up all of their trash on the train, they run it out to us, and they dump it everywhere. And we just kind of are their garbage dump now.
Oh, wow.
So piles of trash. And then we have room for one more visual if we want to fit something else in. But if we feel like this is complete, that's also great.
Maybe we turn some of that trash into compost.
So community gardens.
Oh, awesome. So this is like a new dimension to our community now. We're like tearing open the bags of garbage and sorting it, figuring out what is reusable organic matter, what can go to our stitcher, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. This is great. This is a direction that I didn't think our community was going in until we got here. That's great.
Play to find out. We're discovering as we go.
Yeah.
Okay, and so then the final step we're going to take is we're going to think about 3 things that are in conflict in this enclave. And this is kind of like a triangular tension at the heart of our community, something that isn't yet resolved, that would definitely rear its head during play if we were to play a full session. Maybe I'll again read the full list, and then we'll each talk about which pop out and resonate for us. So the things that could be in conflict: psychic privacy, gender abolition, goddess cults, religious customs, revolutionary fervor, racial identity, indigenous land rights, mutants, scarcity thinking, politics of the void, hedonism, the need for purity, party culture, barriers to access, food justice, women's spaces, the use of violence, trauma, the limitless possibilities of queer sex, known abusers, and desiring a return to society.
So I looked at hedonism and party culture and thought that one of them could be that that's not what we're doing, right? Despite the bacchanals and this culture, but there are people who come to us because they want that, and they try and make it that. We actually have a very actual grounded purpose in what we're doing.
Right.
Like party hoppers from nearby communities don't get it, and they just show up wanting a rager.
Yeah.
Oh, I really like that. That is great.
So it sounds like party culture is where we should go with that.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, there's so much.
Yeah, it's a loaded list. Maybe Tanya, I'm wondering, both you and I selected Gargoyle. Is there something here that like reflects on the struggles of Gargoyle, and also that maybe hints at what Gargoyle is?
I keep returning to desiring a return to society. So I think that there are people in the enclave who just want to go back to everything. And I guess the way I'm envisioning Gargoyle is like, I'm like perched on the edge of a retaining wall or something. And I'm like, there is no return. You don't understand.
Yeah.
The maelstrom is here, and it wants us, and it wants to be in us and with us, and there's no going back. So maybe I think there are people who are always going to try to go back.
We hear that a lot now.
Yeah.
And so maybe there's like maybe Gargoyles just like physically could not integrate into a society of men and women, could not assimilate, could not become invisible within that society.
Yeah. Yeah. I almost see them as like both guardians and harbingers.
Oh, yes. Are we mutants? Is this a mutant gender? I know that that's conflating gender and sex in some loaded ways, but
Right. I almost I wonder if Gargoyle is a maelstrom gender,
yeah.
which means that you've also been touched a little bit by the maelstrom if you also selected Gargoyle.
Absolutely, yeah. That is now true of my character. I mean, I think I stepped into a post-society purpose of life that I would very clearly be a criminal in society, but I am like fulfilling a larger than myself psychic political mission in this post-collapse world.
Yeah.
And you found
Definitely.
a community that sees you not as a criminal,
But as a
Yeah.
gargoyle.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe, is there anything on this list that adds a new final dimension to our community or that kind of captures something we've been talking about? I feel like politics of the void maybe feels resonant with what we were just saying.
Yeah, I think you're right.
because
All right.
most people are probably afraid of the maelstrom, right?
Yeah. I would think so.
All right. So we have a community that exists around a train station by the ocean. We've built outdoor kitchens and community gardens, repurposing things from piles of trash that the Society Intact drops off on a regular and scheduled basis in our community. We have parties, but we aren't trying to promote a party culture. There are some politics of the void distinctions there that are really important to us. Some people desire a return to society, and others know that that is not possible. And it is in this community that our Iris, our Tiger, and our Torch live.
So rich.
It is.
Yeah. And so if we had more than an hour, this is where our first scenes would kick off. But instead, this is where we roll credits.
That's where we start talking and asking questions.
Right.
And if any viewers have questions,
Yeah.
we'll get to those. So please put them in the chat. Wow. So personal and collective dimensions of discovery and transformation. Just want to read that again. Say that again.
That was a phrase that I think I mentioned in our email thread as we were talking back and forth. And sounds like that really resonated for you. And so I imagine we have our first kind of questions in this conversation kicking off from that phrase, it sounds like.
Yeah, because we each have a personal story, right? We made these characters that kind of have a mission, but we also found ways while we were to find the ways that we linked up in this mission, especially even against sort of the desire of the rest of our community.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I'm really interested in this is like, I really want this to be a game about community, but like community starts from acknowledging like who we are as individuals, right? And so there's the order of like we make our individual characters before we talk about the community they fit into, I think felt really important. Because we really actually want for the story to be rich, for our characters to be in tension with one another, and to find like unlikely compromises and solidarity, right? And so I think that's an important thing that is like interesting to get to explore in a game like this, is like the tension between the collective and the individual, and kind of front loading that intentionally in the design by starting by making these like characters who have really divergent skills and worldview.
Did you ever consider the other way? Did you know from the beginning you had to be characters first, or was that play tested?
I think it's something that so actually originally there wasn't a community worksheet in the same way. There was the character playbooks and there's the setting elements, and then that was it. The Enclave worksheet actually came later, and it's strange to think about that because it feels really integral to me now. When I first released Dream Askew, it was like a 13-page kind of prototype PDF only thing that I released as part of a Patreon that I had at the time. And I kind of put it out there, and I was like, great, this game is fun, and it's done. And then years later, Benjamin Rosenbaum reached out to me and said, like, hey, I've been working for years on this sprawling game called Shtetl World that is like an adaptation of Apocalypse World that explores like life in a Shtetl community. But I feel like that every time I work on that game, it becomes bigger. The scope expands faster than the work is completed. And so in the meantime, I want to be creating something that I can actually play. And so is it okay if I use Dream Askew to create this other thing? And so we talked back and forth and collaborated, and like slowly that grew into the collaboration between his game Dream Part and my game Dream Askew. And there was kind of like this dynamic interaction where he would come back and say, like, I worked on the game and I've implemented this change. And I'd be like, oh, that's much better. I'm going to steal that and I'm going to adapt it and make it this. And there's a bit of like a design ping pong. And that's where the key relationship and the community worksheet both came from. I kind of realized like, oh, I said I made a game about queer community, but this is really just a game about like queer aesthetics. Because like if there's supposed to be a community at the heart of the game, why is there not like a community at the center of the table? Like, why is there not, if we're supposed to be caring about relationships, where can I point to the relationships on the page? Right? I can point to people's haircuts on the page, but I can't point to like who they love and would pay for. And so that kind of like clarified that like I said, like if community is at the heart of the game, there should be a community at the heart of the table. That mirroring and echoing should just like feels like really like now obvious, and like how could the game have ever not had it? But so yeah, the Enclave worksheet was actually something that I feel like almost sheepishly was added much later in the process.
This is first time I played. We made downtown Chicago, and this was our Enclave worksheet with a map we drew with the Chicago River here for those.
Oh wow!
Chicago.
That's really great. What was it like playing the game set in? Because you live in Chicago. What was it like playing a game about the collapse of the place where you live?
Well, we made downtown the society intact. So like the loop, which is kind of surrounded by bridges, and the river kind of was like where people had holed up. And so we were in Union Station, which is kind of on the edge of that. So we got to have like interactions with the society intact and with the gangs. And I don't know, it was kind of fun to take apart, reimagine my city, the city that I live in. And to, it was certainly easy to visualize a lot of the things we were doing.
I think one of the things that I really like about this game is that like for some people you can play it and it's like, I'm a spooky psychic in the post-apocalypse. But for other people, it's like a much more personal, close to home reflection on like who you are when like things start to fall apart around you. And the fact that there is that kind of slider of like how much you put yourself into it. It's something I really like, both with this game and just about role-playing games in general, right? There's like this invitation to play with bleed, play close to home, be impacted by the fiction, have the fiction like resonate and say things to you and about you. But also that's just an invitation. You can also just like play to be like, I'm a cool biker gang leader. And I really like the flexibility of that kind of invitation. And so hearing that you played it in in Chicago, like in your city, it's really interesting in that regard.
Yeah, I try to go back and forth when I'm playing. I like to play close to home, and then I like to just reach way out if possible. But that's how I end up. Also, I have a reputation among my friends of playing monstrous women. And that's how, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if that's close to home or
Well, I think like that's one of the interesting things is like, I know for me, there were like years of my life where I kept like returning to certain character archetypes and like playing them and being really fixated or fascinated by them, and not knowing how to read into that until much later in my life.
yeah.
And then being like, oh, I get what was going on for me
Yeah.
there. So I'm sure it is close to home for you in some way. Like there's
Yeah.
it's not random variants that you happen to keep recurring like this archetype, right?
Yes.
Like what it means, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. My therapist and I have had discussions. There was a question in the chat, which is what was the process of creating this game like? And you did answer that in part. You talked a bit about the game design ping pong, which is a great
yeah, that is part of it. I think though the origin story of Dream Askew is maybe also interesting to talk about a little bit here. Dream Askew came about because I was co-hosting a weekly drop-in community gaming night, and it was really oriented towards like new players, like first-time players, people who had been like out of role-playing games for years or like hadn't ever quite clicked. Really like this is like a casual drop-in story games night. Everyone is welcome. And at the time, I was really excited about playing Apocalypse World, which is a game by Vincent and Mackay Baker. And for anyone who has played Apocalypse World or read it, going through character creation here, there's probably a bunch of stuff that jumped out as like a very clear echo of Apocalypse World. And it's because Dream Askew began as an Apocalypse World hack, as many games have, but I was playing Apocalypse World and I was finding like, we are trying to run a 3.5-hour role-playing game session for first-time players in coffee shops. So it's like 3.5 hours, but like people have to like go like buy like a tea and a cupcake or whatever in order to kind of like feel like it's appropriate to be there for 3.5 hours. And people are kind of like cleaning up chairs around you as you're finishing up. So it's kind of more like 3 hours, 10 minutes. And like someone was coming who like had a like 1.5-year-old kid there, and so like was like often needing to kind of step away from the table and be like, I'll be right back, continue without me. And in a lot of ways, Apocalypse World like didn't quite fit that form. And so this started out as like, I want to design a game that is like that makes it easier for people to be kind of like dropping in and out of the session if they need to, that is more approachable for first-time gamers. Apocalypse World has a bunch of stuff on the character sheet that looks cryptic or looks like math. And even though it's not that complicated of a game, the fact that it's like, you have a handgun, +2 harm, plus AP, plus messy, and it's like the grammar of it, I think was felt unapproachable to some people. And so Dream Askew actually started from a place of like, I want to make a version of Apocalypse World that I can run at this queer-oriented, first-time player-oriented drop-in gaming night at a coffee shop. And I think Dream Askew also doesn't play in 3 hours and 10 minutes. I didn't necessarily succeed at making the game for that space perfectly, but it became its own thing, something that was more focused on exploring queer relationships, more focused on the push and pull of community dynamics, and that was diceless and GM-less. That kind of took a lot of the technology that Apocalypse World had created for the MC and turned it all player facing and said, like, what if we just like distribute this around the table and get rid of the MC altogether? And so that's kind of like the origin of Dream Askew, and it just kind of evolved into what in the end felt like this is really its own thing, its own system, its own approach. It has its own perspective.
Yeah.
Even though it's got Apocalypse World's fingerprints and stolen tech all over it.
We have another question in the chat. I'm curious if there is a future for Teenage Nightmare to become a full game.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so for background for anyone who doesn't know what that is, I also designed a game called Monster Hearts that is a game about teenage monsters. Their monstrosity is metaphorical, but also literal. So you're like a werewolf in the 11th grade, and part of what being a werewolf means is like going through confusing anger issues that are like emerging from puberty. And part of what it means is you literally turn into a wolf on the night of the fall. It's both. And there's a lot of themes of like queerness and alienation and shame and occasionally eating people. And Monster Hearts uses dice and has an MC. And years later, I said, well, why don't I take this belonging outside belonging framework that I've developed in Dream Askew and create a Monster Heart version of it. So it's very recursive game design at that point. And I don't know if there's if Teenage Monster is something I am going to develop into a finished like book that I release. In part because I haven't felt drawn to play dozens more stories about queer shame and confusion among teenagers again. And I think that would kind of be the catalyst for me actually investing the time it takes to turn that into a book. That is emotional territory that I feel like I have just very thoroughly explored
Right.
my own personal life and through games. And so am I on board to kind of dedicate another year of my life to re-exploring those historical wounds, re-exploring those like kind of metaphorical traps? Maybe. The PDF is currently public on my website, and it should be. So that at the very least, that can be accessible and visible for all. And whether it ever becomes a book, I'm not sure.
Okay. Awesome.
I'm again half forming questions, which often happens to me. But I'm thinking about this idea of discovering and transformation, and especially the communal aspect of it, and how as we were forming our characters, I mean, it's natural for me because of the work I do, but I was thinking about what issues that I am thinking about it in my day-to-day life, in my real life, are coming up as I think about this character, and how is thinking about what the other characters are doing and choosing, helping me think about and focus in, right? Like, because I don't exist in a vacuum. So by having conversations with people, I do better discovery for myself and better exploration. Like one thing we didn't do was the choose one to ask left questions.
Yeah.
Which really kind of do like that community building. Cause like one of my questions is, why did we break up? Right. It's like, well, that brings up a whole possibility of relationships and connections. Or the other one was, are you among my followers and devotees? So it really, those kind of questions, because I'm thinking, how does this game allow us to do discovery and transformation?
Yeah.
How do the mechanics help us do it? And I think that was one that I find in lots of games that ask questions, kids on brooms, kids on bikes, where you do the relationship questions too. Really allows for that.
Yeah, and I think I glossed over that part just in the interest of time for today. But I think you're right. Those seed a lot of like the dynamics between our specific characters. And those dynamics get kind of like tempered and challenged and changed across the course of play usually.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that that is kind of embedded in the mechanics of the game is there's this thing called moves when we play, and there's kind of the regular moves, you can do that at any time. These are just like narrative prompts. Then there's the weak moves. For example, one of my weak moves is experience a flashback of past trauma. And another of mine is promise something you can't possibly deliver. And then finally, I could get high at the worst possible moment. And weak moves, when you make one, you take a token. And you need to take a token before you can then spend a token to make a strong move. For example, I can get myself or my gang out of harm's way, or I can say just the right thing to extinguish someone's fear and bolster their confidence. And so part of what this is doing is in its like flip system, creating a sense of like tempo and like both success and failure. But one of the other things it's doing in terms of community is it's making an assertion that like you can't actually take care of people who you're in relationship with until you let them see you like as a human, as a real person with like flaws, as a person who makes mistakes, right? Like we need to become vulnerable with one another before we can get to the point where we can actually take care of one another.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a thing that's kind of mechanically embedded into the game.
It's such a thing as being clergy. I have a small community, alternative queer community. A lot of people in the community are queer and I wrestle, I want to be human. Right. And most people in my community are really good at that. But in clergy in general, there's a lot of this that people don't want to see your vulnerabilities or your weakness because it makes them, I don't know, not trust you in a way. But I think I agree with you in that being seen as a full human being with flaws and troubles and depression and whatever it might be, and people knowing about it helps me and the people I go to for help, knowing that they're full human beings.
Yeah, I mean, it's true that like a lot of the time when you're performing like a caring role for someone, you do need to have those really clear boundaries. People need to know that if they're coming to you, they can come to you in a wounded state and you're not going to be busy, dumping your own baggage on them
100%.
or like expecting their emotional labor or something like that, right? Like there needs to be like clarity of process, and that involves having boundaries, and that often involves being like, I am someone you can trust. I am someone who is knowledgeable, but you can't only be that person, right? Like the way that you fill that cup is that you're either vulnerable with that person or you're vulnerable elsewhere, right? There needs to be reciprocity in the larger community as a whole, at the very least, even if there isn't always reciprocity in every individual relationship, right?
In the moment, people need strength.
Yeah.
Sometimes they need someone to hold strong and not. Oftentimes people need someone to not be in a weak space. So 100%.
Right. But I think the inability to acknowledge one's humanity is also what puts people, it creates these power imbalances too, that a lot of religious communities are feeling lately. And then boundaries get crossed, right? When like some people project their stuff onto clergy members, like, so because you're not human, right? You're a role. I don't know, it just gets really convoluted, but I think you're right though, that there's a kind of a limit to that. Like, yes, you can be human, but there still has to be this real solid boundary.
100 boundaries are really important.
Super important.
But I love that this game, I hadn't thought of it that way, that the game says that to be trusted and to be part of community, you have to show your vulnerabilities at times.
Yeah.
I think so that there's an interesting tension there, like you're talking about, of like there needs to be ebb and flow, but you can't necessarily have the ebb and the flow in every relationship in every moment. So you need to be thinking like, where do I need to show up with strength? and where is that strength coming from, right? 'Cause
Mhm.
there's not an endless well of strength for anyone. And I think probably in the case of spiritual work, like that there is a large well of that strength that exists. But like, how are you accessing it? How are you creating the space to access it? Whether that's relational, whether that's like in a relationship to God, whether that's something you generate by going on hikes, right? Whatever the case might be, like, yeah, the ebb and the flow exists. The filling the cup and then emptying it to fill others' cup both
Right.
have to exist. And
And
you
you
have to
start-
figure out how to do that in like a healthy way for your particular situation.
Yeah.
And you start this game with no tokens.
You start the game with
See-
no tokens. We need to see your flaws before we care about your strengths, right? It's
Yeah.
also just like not interesting to see someone be super cool and super put together and super powerful if we don't have a reason to care yet, right?
Right. Right.
We have done it again. We are in the juiciest deep part of the conversation, and we're over time. So how about some closing thoughts? Or did we just do them? Go ahead.
Well, now that we've created these characters, we have to play them. I'm very excited about playing these characters now. Because they feel like people, like, yeah. And I think it's really beautiful how exploring dissolution, in this case, the dissolution of society and you know, everything that we know about it, in exploring that dissolution, we are creating something really fresh and wonderful and new. And I feel like this is a skill set we're going to need. And already probably do need. So I don't know. It's just I'm really enjoying all the tensions that are here in this game. So
I think even though we won't get a chance as a group to play these three characters, like we have created characters that are really like interesting. Like, what does it mean to, in the case of like Ryan, like what does it mean to like have an obligation to protect people, but also an obligation to lead them towards hope and mischief and bacchanal? And for Monsoon, like the like question of like, what does it mean to shelter people from the storm when the storm is like integral to your sense of like identity and liberation, right? Like that's a really interesting tension. I feel like my character has tensions that I don't totally understand yet, because I made the character, so clearly they're close to home in some way. But like, even if we're not going to play these stories, like unearthing these tensions, like bubbling these tensions up to the surface, I think is we get to still to play out that question as we go about our daily lives, right? We get to continue to ponder this and remember that these characters exist, and we must have created them for some kind of reason.
yeah.
I love that the co-creation of characters, because we do oftentimes we do a lot of our character creation like by ourselves and then come together. But I love how the co-creation built the ideas would build on each other, but also helped me in thinking about myself, because someone else would say something. So the co-creation could, if I was intentionally trying to think about myself, clearly helps.
Yeah.
Right. Even if I'm going like, how I don't see how this character is related to me, how, and then someone says something, I go, well, maybe that is why I chose that choice, right? Because I wasn't being, even if I wasn't doing it intentionally. Wow. Well, Avery, thank you so much.
Thank you both for having me.
It was such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
We're coming back in June. I was just going to look up the fourth Thursday. It looks like it's the 23rd. And Jay Dragon is our next guest. And we're probably going to be doing more Belonging Outside Belonging.
Yeah.
With Jay.
A wonderful person.
We're hoping we've Tanya got to talk to Connor Alexander, the lead writer on Coyote and Crow. So we're
Very
hoping to have Connor on the show,
Yep.
and more to come. So thank you everybody for being here. Again, thank you, Avery. What a
Yeah.
treat.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for coming and for giving us your questions. And we should have this, this should be on Twitch for what, a couple weeks?
Couple weeks, and then
Okay.
eventually to YouTube.
Yep.
Cast Gamer is also on YouTube.
Yep.
If you watch it on Twitch, you can see the comment streams.
Yeah.
If you watch on YouTube, you don't get to see any comments.
All right. Well,
All right.
have an amazing night.
Yeah, love and
And
blessings, everybody.
yeah, take care of you and yours.